My husband lied for me for almost 3 years. He lied to my boss, my parents, our friends, our children's school, even to himself. Every time I was too drunk to show up, too hungover to function, or too ashamed to answer the phone, he stepped in and made me look like a tired wife, a stressed mother, a woman who just needed rest. I thought that meant he would never leave. I was wrong. By the time I realized he had stopped protecting me and started protecting our children, he already had the bags packed. I'm 39 years old now. When everything fell apart, I was 36. My name isn't important, but for the sake of the story, call me Rachel. I was married to Daniel for 12 years. We had 2 children, Max, who was 9 at the time, and Sophie, who was 6. From the outside, we looked normal, maybe even happy. Daniel worked as an electrician. He was calm, practical, the kind of man who fixed things before they became emergencies. I worked part-time in the office of a local estate agency. Nothing glamorous, but I liked it. I liked having adult conversations, wearing decent clothes, drinking coffee at a desk instead of reheating it 4 times at home. We lived in a small 3-bedroom house on a quiet street. We weren't rich, but we weren't drowning either. We had a mortgage, one reliable car, one car that made a weird noise every winter, and 2 kids who seemed to need new shoes every 5 minutes. I was the organized one, or at least I used to be. I packed lunches. I remembered birthdays. I bought school uniforms before the last possible day. I kept a calendar on the fridge with different colored pens for everyone. Daniel used to joke that if I ever went missing, the whole family would collapse by Tuesday. I liked being needed. That was probably part of the problem, because after a while, being needed started to feel like being trapped. Not because I didn't love my family. I did. I loved them so much it sometimes scared me. But there was this constant pressure in my chest. Work, bills, school forms, dinner, laundry, birthdays, dentist appointments, emails from teachers, Daniel's long hours, my mother's opinions, my own expectations. Nobody was abusing me. Nobody was starving me of love. I wasn't living some nightmare. I was just tired. And because I didn't think tired was a serious enough reason to ask for help, I found another way to quiet myself down. At first, it was wine. Just wine. That's how I said it in my head. Just a glass after the kids went to bed. Just something to take the edge off. Just what normal mothers did. The first time I remembered drinking in secret was after Sophie's school Christmas play. It had been one of those days where every tiny thing went wrong. Max forgot his PE kit. Sophie cried because her tights were itchy. A client shouted at me at work because a house viewing was canceled. Daniel was stuck on a job and couldn't make it to the play until the last minute. I sat in that school hall, surrounded by parents filming on their phones, smiling like everyone else, while inside I felt like I was being scraped hollow. After the play, we came home, fed the kids, bathed them, argued gently about nothing, and finally got them into bed. Daniel fell asleep on the sofa by 9:30. I poured myself a glass of white wine in the kitchen, then another. Then I stood there in the dark, by the sink, and drank straight from the bottle. Not because it tasted good, it didn't. Because after a few minutes, the tightness in my chest loosened. My thoughts got softer around the edges. For the first time all day, nobody needed anything from me. The next morning, I felt rough, but manageable. I blamed it on bad sleep. I told Daniel I had a headache. He kissed my forehead and said, "You do too much." That sentence became dangerous to me, because every time he said it, it gave me permission. I started buying wine with the weekly shop, then I started buying extra bottles and hiding them before I came home. At first, I hid them because I didn't want Daniel to think I was being greedy. Then I hid them because I knew he would be worried. There's a big difference between privacy and secrecy. I crossed that line long before I admitted it. I drank when the kids went to bed, then while cooking dinner. then before Daniel got home, so I could already feel normal by the time he walked in. That's the strange thing about alcohol when you start depending on it. You don't drink to feel drunk, you drink to feel like yourself. At least that's what you tell yourself. I had rules. Never drink before school pickup, never drink in the morning, never drive after drinking, never drink when the kids were awake. Every alcoholic I've met had rules at some point. The rules are there so you can point at them and say, "See, I'm in control." Then one by one, you break them. The first rule I broke was drinking while the kids were awake. It was a Saturday afternoon. Daniel was working. It was raining. The kids were arguing over a video game. I was folding laundry and felt this sudden, unreasonable anger rise up in me. Not normal irritation, something darker. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went to the kitchen and poured vodka into a mug with orange juice, a coffee mug. Like that somehow made it less real. I drank it standing by the washing machine while Sophie asked if she could have a biscuit. I remember looking at her little face and thinking, I'm still a good mother. I'm just having a hard day. That thought carried me for a long time. I wasn't a drunk. I was a good mother having hard days. Then the hard days became every day. Daniel noticed before anyone else did. Of course he did. He knew my moods, my eyes, the way I moved when I was trying too hard to act normal. At first, he asked gently, "Have you been drinking?" And I would laugh. "Daniel, it's one glass of wine." Sometimes it was one glass. Sometimes it was six. Sometimes it was one glass because I had already finished the bottle before he got home. He started checking the recycling bin, so I stopped putting bottles there. I wrapped them in old shopping bags and took them to public bins. Then I started hiding them in places I'm ashamed to even write down. Behind towels in the airing cupboard, inside a box of Christmas decorations, in the boot of my car, once, inside Sophie's old baby bag in the loft. Daniel found 3 empty bottles in the laundry basket one morning. He stood in the doorway holding them, his face pale. "Rachel," he said, "this isn't normal." I snapped at him. Neither is working 60 hours a week and leaving me with everything. That shut him up, not because it was fair, because it hurt him. And I learned that if I made him feel guilty, I could avoid feeling guilty myself. That was the first time I used his love against him. After that, he started covering for me. The first time was at Max's football match. I was supposed to take him because Daniel had an emergency call-out. I had been drinking the night before and woke up shaking, sweating, and sick. I told Daniel I had food poisoning. He came home from work, changed in 2 minutes, and took Max himself. When Max asked why I didn't come, Daniel said, "Mom's not well." That became our family phrase. "Mom's not well. Mom has a migraine. Mom's exhausted. Mom needs a rest." I hated hearing it and relied on it at the same time. My drinking got worse after my dad got diagnosed with cancer. That sounds like an excuse. Maybe it is. But it's also what happened. My dad and I were close in a difficult way. He was proud, stubborn, not very emotional, but he showed love by fixing things. When he got sick, I felt like the world had become unsafe in a way I couldn't repair. I started drinking during lunch breaks at work. Mini bottles of vodka from the corner shop. I'd put them in my handbag, walk back to the office, and drink in the toilet. Then I'd chew gum, spray perfume, wash my hands twice, and return to my desk smiling at clients. I was never as good at hiding it as I thought. One afternoon, my manager asked if everything was okay. I said, "I'm just tired." Everyone believed tired. Tired was respectable. Drunk was not. Daniel found out about the lunch drinking because I left a receipt in my coat pocket. 5 mini vodkas, bought at 12:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. He waited until the kids were asleep. Then he put the receipt on the kitchen table. I stared at it like it belonged to someone else. He said, "Tell me the truth." I cried. I said I was overwhelmed. I said I missed my dad already, even though he was still alive. I said I didn't know how it had gotten so bad. All of that was true. Then I promised I would stop. That was not true. Not because I knew I was lying in that exact moment. I meant it. I really did. I think that's what people don't understand. Addicts can mean every promise when they say it. The problem is that meaning it doesn't make you able to keep it. Daniel helped me pour the alcohol down the sink. He held me while I cried. He searched online for therapists. He told me we would deal with it together. For about 10 days, I didn't drink. Then I found a bottle of cooking brandy at the back of a cupboard. I told myself it didn't count. That sentence should be printed on every bottle. It doesn't count. By the next month, I was worse than before. I started missing work. Daniel called in for me and said I had stomach bugs, migraines, flu, anything that sounded believable. My manager was kind but not stupid. She reduced my hours temporarily. I pretended that was helpful. Really, it just gave me more time alone. Money became tight. I was spending more than I admitted. Alcohol is expensive when you buy it daily and try to hide it. I used our grocery money, then my credit card, then a store card Daniel didn't know about. I ordered alcohol with online shopping and hid it under normal items. Bread, milk, cereal, vodka. Like the bread, made it less shameful. Then came one of the moments I wish I could erase. I forgot to pick Sophie up from school. I didn't mean to. I had been drinking in the afternoon and fell asleep on the sofa. My phone was on silent. The school called me 6 times. Then they called Daniel. He left a job halfway through and drove there, covered in dust and panic. When he got home with Sophie, I was awake, sitting on the sofa, pretending I had just had a nap. Sophie looked confused. Daniel looked terrified. After the kids went upstairs, he whispered, "You cannot do this to them." I whispered back, "I know." He said, "No, Rachel, I don't think you do." He slept in the spare room that night. The next morning, he told me he had called my mother. I lost my mind, not because he was wrong, because someone outside our house knew. My mother came over and cried at the kitchen table. She said she didn't understand. She said I had 2 beautiful children. She said I had a good husband. She said women in our family didn't act like this. That sentence made me drink that night. I know how that sounds. But shame doesn't make addiction smaller. It feeds it. Daniel started going to meetings. Not for himself, he said, but to understand how to help me. I mocked him for it once. "Great," I said. "So now you're telling strangers I'm a drunk?" He didn't shout. He just said, "Someone has to tell the truth somewhere." I hated him for that. Now I think it was the bravest thing he did. The twist, though, was that I thought those meetings were about saving our marriage. They weren't. Not by the end. Daniel had started documenting everything. Dates I missed school pickup, photos of hidden bottles, screenshots of messages where I admitted drinking, bank statements, notes about times I passed out while the children were home. I didn't know any of that. I thought he was still covering for me. And he was, in public. But privately, he was building a case to make sure I couldn't be left alone with our children if I got worse. When I found out, I called it betrayal. It took me a long time to understand that it was protection. The night everything ended was in March. I remember because it was the first warm evening of the year. The kind where people start opening windows again and pretending winter is over. Daniel had taken the kids to his sister's house for the afternoon. I was supposed to use the time to rest and clean up because his parents were coming for dinner the next day. Instead, I drank. I started with wine, then vodka, then whatever was left in a bottle I had hidden in a shoebox under our bed. At some point, I decided I wanted more. I should not have driven. I knew that then. I know it now. There is no excuse. But addiction makes you negotiate with reality. The shop was only 5 minutes away. I felt fine. I would be careful. I had done it before. I got in the car. I didn't crash. I didn't hurt anyone. That is not because I was responsible. It is because I was lucky. On the way back, I clipped the side mirror of a parked car turning into our street. The noise scared me so badly that I kept driving and parked outside our house like nothing happened. But someone saw, a neighbor. By the time Daniel came home with the kids, there was a police officer at the door. I was in the kitchen, trying to act sober with a bottle hidden behind the washing powder. Daniel walked in, saw the officer, saw my face, and knew. The children were behind him. Max looked from me to the officer and said, "What did Mom do?" No child should ever have to ask that. The officer was calm, too calm. He asked me questions. I lied badly. Daniel said almost nothing. He just sent the kids upstairs and stood beside the counter with his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. I was breathalyzed. I failed, not a little. After they took me in, I remember sitting in a cell with fluorescent lights buzzing above me, feeling annoyed. That's the ugly truth. At first, I wasn't thinking about my children. I wasn't thinking about Daniel. I was thinking about how unfair it was, how embarrassing it was, how the neighbor should have minded his own business. That is how sick I was. I was angry at everyone except myself. Hours later, when I sobered up enough to feel the edges of what had happened, I asked to call Daniel. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. When I was released the next morning, my mother picked me up. She barely looked at me. I said, "Where's Daniel?" She said, "At the house." The drive home was silent. I expected a fight. I expected shouting. I expected Daniel's parents to be there. Maybe my mother crying again. Maybe the kids hiding upstairs. But when I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The hallway looked different. Sophie's pink coat was gone from the hook. Max's football boots were gone. The school bags were gone. I walked upstairs. Their rooms were half empty. Not empty like they had moved forever. Empty like someone had packed quickly but carefully. Favorite clothes, toothbrushes, school uniforms, Sophie's rabbit, Max's Nintendo. I stood in Sophie's room staring at the bare patch on her bed where her stuffed animals used to be. Daniel was in our bedroom. He had a suitcase open on the floor. I said, "Where are they?" He didn't turn around. "At my sister's." "For how long?" He folded one of his shirts slowly. "I don't know." My chest went cold. "Daniel, please. I messed up. I know I messed up. But you can't take my children." That's when he turned around. His face looked older than it had the day before, not angry, done. He said, "I didn't take them from you. I took them from what you keep choosing." I started crying immediately, big, ugly sobs. I told him I would go to rehab. I told him I would stop. I told him this was my wake-up call. He looked at me with so much sadness that I still see it sometimes when I close my eyes. He said, "Rachel, you've had wake-up calls. You just kept hitting snooze." Then he handed me an envelope. Inside were copies of messages, bank statements, photos, notes, school emails, and a letter from a solicitor. He had already spoken to someone. He had already planned this. While I thought he was still on my side, I threw the papers at him. I screamed that he had betrayed me. I said he was using my illness against me. I said he wanted to punish me. I said things I can never take back. He didn't shout once. He just said, "I have covered for you for years. I lied so you could keep your job. I lied so your mother wouldn't fall apart. I lied so our kids wouldn't know how bad it was. And all it did was give you more room to drink." I told him I hated him. He nodded like he had expected that. Then he picked up his suitcase and walked past me. At the bottom of the stairs, he stopped and said, "I hope you get better, but they can't wait for you to decide whether you want to live or disappear." Then he left. I sat on the stairs for a long time after the door closed. I wish I could say I called a rehab center right away. I didn't. I went to the kitchen, found the bottle behind the washing powder, and finished it. That was the last drink I had in that house. I woke up the next afternoon on the kitchen floor. My cheek was stuck to something spilled. My phone was dead. The house was cold because the back door was slightly open. For a few seconds, I didn't remember. Then I did. The children's coats were gone. Daniel was gone. And for the first time, there was nobody left to lie for me. That was the part that finally broke through. Not the police, not the shame, not the empty rooms, the silence. I called my mother. Then I called a treatment service Daniel had written down months earlier and left on the fridge. I had thrown it away at the time. He had put another copy in the envelope. Even at the end, he was trying to leave me a door. I went into detox 4 days later. It was awful. There's no poetic way to describe it. I shook. I sweated. I cried. I hated everyone. I wanted to leave every hour. I felt like my skin didn't fit. I felt shame so heavy it was almost physical. But I stayed. Not because I suddenly became strong, because there was nothing left to protect my drinking. That was 2.5 years ago. I have been sober for 27 months. I wish that sentence fixed everything. It doesn't. Daniel and I are divorced now. He has primary custody. I see Max and Sophie regularly, but not the way I used to. At first, visits were supervised. That was humiliating, but it was also fair. Max is 12 now. He is polite with me, but careful. He watches me when I pour a drink, even if it's just tea. Sophie still hugs me, but sometimes she asks if I'm sleepy sick again, and I know exactly what she means. Daniel is kind to me in a distant way. That might be worse than anger. He answers messages about the children. He sends school updates. He lets me come to parents' evenings if I'm well. But there is a wall there now, and I built it bottle by bottle while he begged me to stop. He has someone new in his life. I found out last Christmas. I cried for 2 days, not because he didn't deserve happiness, because he did. That was what hurt. He deserved the version of me I kept promising and never became. I work full-time now in a different office. I go to meetings twice a week. I have a sponsor. My mother and I are still repairing things. Some friends never came back. I don't blame them. People are allowed to leave when your chaos keeps burning them. The hardest part of sobriety isn't not drinking. It's remembering clearly. When I was drunk, everything was blurred enough to survive. Now I remember Max's face at the door with the police officer behind him. I remember Sophie asking Daniel why Mum smelled funny. I remember my husband washing sick out of my hair while I called him controlling. I remember all of it, and I have to live with it sober. A few months ago, Sophie asked if she could keep a toothbrush at my flat. It sounds small, maybe stupid, but I had to go into the bathroom and cry quietly because it felt like someone had handed me a tiny piece of trust. Not forgiveness, not a second chance at the old life, just a toothbrush. That's what recovery looks like for me. Small things I don't deserve but try to honor. I'm writing this because I used to think alcoholics looked different from me. I thought they were people who drank in the morning from paper bags, people who lost jobs, people whose children were scared of them. Then I became all of those things, just in a nicer kitchen. If your partner is covering for you, please understand something. That is not proof that things are okay. That is proof that someone loves you enough to carry the weight you keep dropping. But people get tired, even the good ones, especially the good ones. And one day, they may stop covering for you. Not because they don't love you anymore, because they finally love themselves and their children enough to stop drowning with you.